fourth aspect of early life that Hardy and Lawrence have in common is the period of apprenticeship and urban life. Now, once again, the lives of Hardy and Lawrence took a similar turn as they were both apprenticed in the town where they had been schooled. Thomas Hardy studied architecture for 3 years under a Dorchester architect who specialized in restoring Gothic churches, a decision that then proved fruitful since it developed his gift for sketching, launched him into a successful career as an architect, and provided him with professional experience and knowledge on which he drew profusely in several of his works of fiction, including Jude the Obscure and the Well-Beloved, whose heroes are stonemasons and sculptors. Lawrence also famously recreated his time as a clerk in a Nottingham factory in Sons and Lovers, an apprenticeship which only lasted a few months before Lawrence fell ill with pneumonia. Unlike Hardy's happy and successful training as an architect, Lawrence's experience at Haywood's was a painful ordeal, and the chapter of Paul's internship at Jordan's in Sons and Lovers gives us a vivid description of this. Harry Moore even suggests in The Priest of Love that Lawrence's time at Haywood's may have been worse, owing to the factory girl's vicious treatment of him, which was then toned down in the novel. This period in each writer's young life also exposed them more directly to an urban setting and lifestyle, which Lawrence records in somber tones in Sons and Lovers, contrasting them with the rural scenes around Miriam's farm. Harry Moore highlights the changes which industrialization brought to bear upon the old town of Nottingham, a theme that Lawrence continually developed in his subsequent novels and essays. So here's a quotation from Harry Moore. Lawrence's life now centered on a different part of Nottingham than he had known before. He was nearly a mile south of that region of park and woodland which surrounded the high school. He was in an industrial quarter, working in a tiny, dark old street whose quaintness was already being sullied by the factories and offices that were either replacing or taking over the stately Georgian houses there. Lawrence in Sons and Lovers gave Castlegate the name of an actual nearby street, Spaniel Row. He describes it in rather Dickensian terms as gloomy and old-fashioned, having low dark shops and dark green house doors with brass knockers, yellow ochred doorsteps projecting onto the pavement, then another old shop whose small window looked like a cunning half-shut eye." Unquote. Hardy, like Lawrence, was impressed by the discrepancy between the rural world of his childhood and the urban scene of modern technical progress, as he confines in his ghost-written biography. Here's another quotation from Life of Thomas Hardy. Owing to the accident of his being an architect's pupil in a county town of assizes and aldermen, which had advanced to railways and telegraphs and daily London papers, yet not living there, but walking in every day from a world of shepherds and ploughmen in a hamlet 3 miles off, where modern improvements were still regarded as wonders, he saw rustic and borrowed doings in juxtaposition peculiarly close." Unquote. Hardy was to elaborate considerably on this discrepancy in his fiction, recording both the archaic isolation of his native Dorset, which was fictionalized as the county of Wessex, and the introduction of forms of modernity which affected ancient rural customs and modes of life. In 1902, Lawrence then started teaching at the British School in Eastwood as a pupil teacher, and then in Ilkeston. After saving enough money to attend Nottingham University College, he enrolled on a teacher training course in 1906 at the age of 21. He disliked the classes he received, as well as the practice teaching that he had to do, which bode ill for the teaching career that he had embarked on. Yet after obtaining his teacher's certificate in 1908, he was offered a position at the Davidson Road School in Croydon, where he started a month later. In London, Lawrence was ushered into intellectual and artistic circles by Ford Madox Hoofer, who was later to become Ford Madox Ford, who encouraged his literary aspirations and introduced him to publishers and other writers, among these Ezra Pound and William Yeats. Lawrence did not appear to be unhappy in London, and he readily answered social engagements, though he continued to visit his family and his lovers in Eastwood quite frequently. After his mother's death in 1910, however, his mood, as Harry Moore remarks, I quote, was of continued bitterness, unquote, and combined with the strain of teaching and writing, culminated in his serious illness of 1911. Going back in time, in 1862, having finished his apprenticeship as an architect's clerk, Thomas Hardy took the train from Dorchester to London with 2 letters of recommendation from his former employer, and he was hired in London by the architect Arthur Blomfield. At the age of 21, a very inexperienced and unassertive Thomas Hardy suffered from Londoners' disdain for his obviously countrified manners and speech, which Lawrence also had to endure in his time. However successful and satisfying his work for Blomfield was during these London years, Hardy suffered acute depression due to the loneliness that his daytime work and his nightly private studies imposed on his life. On top of that, the city's intense bustle and the squalor eventually made him ill and forced him to return to Dorset. Michael Milgate notes that, quote, from Her in the Country, one of the sonnets, dated from 1866, turns upon a contrast between countryside and crass, clanging town, of which Hardy must have been very much aware, unquote. Now, despite this dispiriting first taste of city life, Hardy later returned to London almost annually during what we call the season to enjoy concerts, dinners, various lectures and exhibitions at the Royal Academy. When his talent and fame as a writer of serialized fiction began to be recognized, he was introduced to countless influential members of London society, and he himself became a well-known figure in literary and upper-class circles, as his biography, The Life of Thomas Hardy, takes pains to chronicle, with every single meeting and lord and lady that he met put down.